entrepreneurs, and professionals of Tampa Bay. Welcome to your hour for getting the information, the tools, and the connections for elevating your business. Welcome to Getting the Edge with Kelly Wilson. And here's your host, Kelly Wilson.
Welcome to Getting the Edge. I'm your host, Kelly Wilson. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited to be here. We're filming always at the Genghis Khan restaurant at 3114 West Bay to Bay. If you're in the South Tampa area, come and check out their delicious Mediterranean cuisine. Again, really excited to be here with you. We're here every Thursday with you, filming with great business owners and leaders in our community, the Getting the Edge. And it's really just a 1-hour opportunity to not only highlight business owners and professionals and leaders in our community. It's a great opportunity to get to know them personally and really get to know what makes them tick. There's trials and errors and successes and failures, and really get to know them really well. So again, really happy to be here. If you have not yet, please check out the edgebusinessmagazine.com and make sure you check out the latest issue of Edge Business Magazine. Latest issue features Dr. Louis Crespo of Crespo & Associates, so make sure you check that out, and you can subscribe today so you never miss a copy. And a new website coming soon. We're still working on that for you, so we'll be launching that very, very shortly. I cannot believe it's February.
Crazy.
It's February.
Crazy.
I'm really excited. We have a great show lined up today. I'm really excited to have Andy Gold. You are just so multi-talented, I can't just say exactly what you are, because you're so many. You wear many different hats, and goodness, you and I can sit and talk for a long time. So it is an hour show. We've got to make sure I make sure we time us. But Andy, you are one of the. So you are a graduate professor at HCC, Hillsborough Community College.
Well, at the University of Tampa and at the University of South Florida, I teach in their graduate school.
Okay.
But then I teach full-time at Hillsborough Community College, which is a community college that leads to an associate's degree, so there's no graduate programs there.
Absolutely. So, thank you for clarifying that. That makes perfect sense now that you say it. Now I totally get that. But I was kind of joking prior to the show starting, how many professors that are actually have a presence at all three universities in Tampa?
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
It is cool. I feel really blessed and lucky to be able to do that. So,
and you kind of mentioned it's just in the last couple of years that you've been kind of a part of the higher education community for Tampa. Is that correct?
Yeah, my wife and I moved down here in 2012, so about almost 7 years ago, and I'm relatively new to higher education, so my whole professional trajectory has been in the field of finance, and then a whole bunch of small business startups and some failures along the way.
Yeah, we're going to talk all about that too.
That's led me to education.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think we're very lucky to have you as a part.
Well,
and again, we've known each other for a while now. Yep. We've had some opportunity to talk and just really get to know each other. And I just think you can be so well-rounded, and I think all the students that are in your presence are going to be greatly benefited by the advice and direction that you can give them. So
yeah, so I think
you.
With students, it can go either way, and we'll talk about some of those student stories, but I just wanted to really thank you for inviting me on the show and for allowing me this platform to be able to share some of my background.
Absolutely. Well, again, and that's what this is about. If we can highlight, or obviously highlighting the individuals like yourself, but hopefully we're going to touch someone that's watching that can pick up on some of the tips that we're providing.
Let's put our finger out.
Right? I kind of like that. I'll maybe think about that in the future. I feel like Diana Ross song. I reach out and touch. Anyway, okay. Now, aside from the universities, you are also the co-founder for Operation Startup. Did I say that correctly?
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about that as well.
Okay, so Operation Startup is a collaborative partnership between Hillsborough Community College and Hillsborough County.
Okay.
And it's a center in Ybor City that helps early stage veterans, social entrepreneurs, of course our students at HCC, and everyday entrepreneurs that are early on in their business development to learn about how to effectively launch and grow a business enterprise.
And I like that term that you're using, everyday entrepreneurs, and I understand that philosophy now, and I appreciate that you're offering that. You hear a lot about tech startups and tech is so, everyone's so focused on tech. And granted, that's great. We need to have that focus there, but what about the everyday entrepreneurs that are launching opening new salons or flower shops or
mobile car washes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we could go on and on. The bakery down the street, you know. So who helps and supports those? So that is.
So I think with Operation Startup and the work that I'm really passionate about, there's basically like two sides to entrepreneurship. One is the one that Kelly described, which we would call the innovation-driven enterprise, which is a high-growth, scalable, kind of tech-focused company that's looking to grow a lot, make people a lot of money, and change the world. And then the other side is what's called the small to medium-sized enterprise, which is sort of the less sexy side of entrepreneurship. And that's the side where we're positioned. You know, we help people trying to launch small, localized businesses that could grow and attain great scale eventually, but the immediate impact is to create jobs, add to our community, and make the economy locally a lot more vibrant. So that's kind of where we're
That's
positioned.
what I was just going to say, and that is where I think the difference stands out from your everyday entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I don't remember statistically now, it's been a few years since I researched it, but statistically, do you know like what percentage of the small businesses make up and help the community, their community thrive?
Well, I would say
60%?
I would say over 70%.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a high failure rate too associated with business enterprising in general, but typically with the innovation-driven enterprises, the failure rate can be higher because there's a larger amount of money required to stand up those businesses before they're able to reach that scale. Whereas with, let's say you're going to open up a bakery, you know within 6 to 8 months if it's becoming cash flow positive and generating a profit, so it's able to contribute more actively to the economy faster.
Right, and the jobs that they provide, and a lot of these, you know, when you're talking about the tech, a lot of them, we'd love to see them stay local, but many of them, as they grow, then they're out and they're headquartered elsewhere.
That's right.
Whereas many of these businesses, the everyday entrepreneurs that you're nurturing, their businesses are going to be here. They may then decide to open up other locations, potentially license or franchise later. But ultimately, their presence is here locally and will provide jobs to our local
community. I mean, I have one student story I can share with you real quickly. This woman came into our program. She and her husband opened up a tattoo shop. Her husband is a tattoo artist. We helped her develop a business model around that tattoo shop. Her name's Maria. And I was like, that's great, you know, they're the typical everyday entrepreneur. They eventually hired 6, 7, 8 employees, and then they identified a new problem, which was, I don't know anything about tattoos because I don't have any tattoos, but when you get a tattoo, there's an aftercare product that you can put onto the tattoo to help your skin heal and the vibrancy of the ink maintain itself. And she found a void in the market for a product that was not damaging to the skin. So she developed an organic aftercare product. It's called Black Eye Natural. And she now is selling that product to many, many tattoo shops throughout the state of Florida. So while she started out as a small business owner, she's now identified some scale in her business with her husband that now is allowing the business to grow even further.
That's a great story. Well, and I think we talked about it a lot on the show with different guests. You know, we start out with one direction and you know where you're going, and I don't think that changes, but you evolve. You know, different circumstances arise and you have to be adaptable to change and embrace opportunities.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really surprised me when I first started to teach entrepreneurship was the misunderstanding many people have about what entrepreneurship actually is. So a lot of people think it has something to do with starting a business, which makes sense because you hear about all these entrepreneurial stories and so on. But I think it's much broader than that. I think that entrepreneurship is all about developing a way of thinking, a mindset that allows you to navigate through many of life challenges that we all face, also starting a business. But what it does that I think is most powerful, especially today, is the future is so unknown, and the future is so dynamic and changing rapidly. So what having an entrepreneurial way of thinking does is it prepares you to better navigate through that type of world that we just don't know what it's going to be like.
Uncertainty. Absolutely. That is very well put, because there are a lot of people that open up a business, but they are not necessarily an entrepreneur, and they cannot take the stress or the uncertainty that comes along with that. And if you cannot, you are in trouble from the start. So yes, I can see where that would be very important to identify.
And what our job is as educators, as folks that mentor and advise aspiring small business owners, one of our most critical job functions is to get that person to the point where they realize they need to kill that business idea and not work on it any further, so they don't waste additional resources, time, money, things like that, towards something that was just never going to happen.
Right.
And that's hard for a lot of people, but the sooner you get to that point and just start working on something different, the better off that person is, and really the better off our community is, because we're able to create more efficiencies.
That's a great, there's a book I have in mind, and I'm trying, it goes right along with that idea, and I'm trying to think. I know it's Seth Godin.
Okay, The Purple Cow, perhaps?
No, that's not it.
Okay.
I was trying to think, maybe it'll come to me.
He's awesome, though.
But
Seth
it was all
Godin.
about quitting,
Yeah.
and really, identifying early on when to quit, and just let it go, and then move on. Because
we don't call it quitting.
Absolutely,
we
right.
call it learning. So.
But years ago, growing up, you were taught never to quit. Now you can't quit. You start something, you have to finish it. But I think it's really just a different way of looking at things. It's not quitting. But you have to know when to transition your effort somewhere else.
That's right.
And so quitting, it's kind of like quitting is okay. I mean, you move on and you experience that and you learn from it, and then take what you've learned and
one of the best
forward.
tips I can give to your audience before we end this segment is. Before
You're not supposed to know how many minutes we have left.
Okay.
You just shared my minute segment. No, I'm kidding.
Okay,
I'm
we'll edit
joking.
that out, I guess.
No, it's funny.
Anyways, one tip I would have is that before you actually start a business, you should think first about how much you're prepared to lose by starting that business in terms of time, money, effort, all of those things. And that becomes a guideline for you. So if you do start and you reach that threshold and the thing just isn't happening,
right.
It makes it a lot easier to sever ties with that business than just starting with a blind-eyed optimism that this is going to be the greatest thing ever. So I think it's always best to think, how much am I prepared to lose by starting this business before you start?
And isn't it true, that's difficult, because we can make plans, right? You can make a strategy. I mean, granted, you have to do your research and know that product and that you have a place out there, and that you have a lot of potential to make the money. But isn't it hard to gauge a time frame of how, when you expect certain things to happen by? Because you can have a plan all day long, but that doesn't mean it's going to roll out exactly like it should. And we're going to talk about that when we come back from break. But we'll stop there. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Getting the Edge.
This is the Cannabis Podcast, powered by TrueLeaf on Radio Influence. It's an inside look and the scientific facts in and around the world of medical cannabis. Now, here is your host, Ian Beckles.
He's a successful entrepreneur, published author, top listing agent, a real estate and finance expert that goes to bat for you every day as a consumer advocate. Your host and the consumer quarterback, Brandon Rhymes.
Welcome back to Getting the Edge. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am your host, Kelly Wilson, and always thrilled to be here with you on Getting the Edge, sharing great stories and great information from great inspiring local leaders and today professors. And Andy Gold, thank you again so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
If you missed any of the beginning of the show, please make sure you go back and check out. I always say hit rewind and definitely get back to the beginning. Wow, just again, really, you're full of great story that you shared about the ink shop. And what we're really talking about is the everyday entrepreneurs and really what that means, and it being different than a tech and how there is such a need. And these everyday entrepreneurs are who help our local communities thrive. And it's so important that somebody is there nurturing them. And because and my producer and I were even talking during break, when we were starting out so many years ago, that did not exist.
Absolutely not.
One of the reasons that I started Edge when I did in 2013, which was originally, Edge was a membership community organization. It was to help like-minded people like myself. I was in real estate for many, many years, and through that was a part of every chamber, in every county.
Imagine,
But, and because back then, that's a whole other story. I was very successful and did well, but looking back, I should have micro-niched and claimed a territory. But back then, in my mind, I didn't want to eliminate any potential business. I get it now. But that's part of our process. We learn from everything we've been through, and even the successes and our failures. But anyway, going back to entrepreneurship, it's changed a lot, and I know a lot of the great people involved in the chambers, and they are more relationship oriented. But back when I was a part of them, they all seemed so transactional, and it's hard. I mean, how can you really have a real relationship out of just you need the relationships. Anyway,
sure do.
It seems like you're providing that now, and that's great to know that.
Yeah, I think it takes a village to do almost anything in life, and that includes building a community that supports entrepreneurship, that involves building a family, a business, whatever it might be. Completing school requires a lot of different guidance along the way. So I believe that community building, establishing relationships is one of the most profound acts we can all engage in. Because that's how we meet cool people.
We
and that's
all
how
benefit. It's a win-win for everyone. And everyone can stay siloed in their own areas, but if we all come together. Henry Ford, one of my favorite quotes, if we're all moving forward together, then success takes care of itself.
I love that.
That's one of my favorite, and that's kind of my life, my philosophy, and what I live by. And
Henry Ford also once said,
I love it.
that if he had asked people years ago what they really desired in a form of transportation, that most people would have said a faster horse. And the reason that that's important is that sometimes one of the jobs that entrepreneurs have is to innovate on behalf of consumers. Like sometimes you can ask consumers, what do you want? What do you want in this product? How can I help make your life better? But sometimes people can't express what they actually want. It's hidden deep within them.
You don't even know that that's an option a lot of the time. I'll talk with some of the guys that are and girls that are more tech-oriented, that when they're trying to come up with solutions to help your business run smoother, they offer suggestions on products that I didn't even know were options or solutions because I didn't know they existed. So it's that mentality in a sense where people are forward-thinking and in their specialty.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
So you have to thank goodness for those innovative thinkers.
I think
we wouldn't have cars, right? We'd still be on a horse.
I think we're facing a lot of challenges right now, though, as I look forward. And I don't believe that the future can be predicted, but I see a couple of problem spots that I think actually provide opportunities for us to make things better. One of the challenges we face is our public education system, while producing wildly intelligent young people, is very much structured to squeeze out of people any kind of creative element that they had in them as a young child. So as you progress through the school system, you're told, don't pursue the arts. You're not going to make any money being a musician or an artist.
Everyone has an opinion.
Get into STEM education or become an engineer. And the problem with that is people feel like their creativity is stifled, I define creativity as a form of applied imagination. So everybody's got dreams and ideas for something, but it's the people that take action on those ideas that are the creative folks. And if we're not producing more of them, it's going to certainly create a stifling environment for innovation as we move forward.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to see it like somewhat appreciated and celebrated, and
Yeah.
because again, growing up when I did, entrepreneurship was not something that,
Right.
I mean, first
Now
of all,
it's like all the
absolutely,
rage.
it wasn't in the universities. I mean, God forbid you said that you wanted to own your own business someday.
Right,
People,
yeah.
oh, okay, well, you'll be unemployed the rest of your life.
Right.
You know, but it's such a different mindset, and I think it really helped us push when the kind of the economy changed and we kind of tanked in early mid 2000s.
Yeah.
And then so many people that had all this invested in corporate and long-term longevity in these corporations that they'd been with 20 or 30 years were then losing everything.
Yeah, we're seeing that in our college credit program at Hillsborough Community College. We have a very experiential and applied entrepreneurship program there where you don't learn about how to start a business by reading a book about starting a business. You learn about starting a business by actually working on your own business. And what we're seeing in the cohorts that we have coming through is a great cross-section of what you just said. We're seeing traditional 18 to 24-year-olds coming into that program. We're seeing people that have master's degrees coming into the program who just really want to try to get a business going. And then we're seeing that third group that you were alluding to, which is the person that never went to college, has been working for the man, so to speak, for 15 or 16 years, is sick of it, has an idea for a business. They finally reach that breaking point where they want to take action, so they come in too, and it creates this amazing laboratory for innovation in our classes, and I feel so fortunate to be a small part of that.
Absolutely. Well, and I think, because yes, I hope everyone does come to a point in their life where they can no longer take it. And if these inklings or intuition or these feelings are pushing at you to do more, or take a chance, then listen to them, and then get the guidance and the support that you need through these organizations, which thankfully are there.
Yeah.
But it's how sad is it, at least for me, to think about individuals that do something every day for their entire lives and they're not happy, and they have this idea and they have these dreams of what they would like to do, but they never have the push to do it. And I hope, and that's another thing that we're great for here,
I
is the
think
push.
it's not having the push is one aspect of it. The other thing I've identified is people have a great fear of failure.
Right, I was just going to say that.
And that fear of failure, we all know, can only do one of two things to you. It can either stop you from starting, which is bad, because you're worried if you start and fail, someone will like point the finger at you, oh, you're a failure. Or worse, it stops you from stopping. So if you were brave enough to start, and
It
then
cripples you in the movement.
and then, well, no, you start and then you realize this thing is doomed.
Oh,
but
right.
you don't shut it down because you're worried about being ridiculed for that, and you keep working on something that you consciously know is not going to work out. Both of those outcomes are horrible. One, not starting is terrible, and two, not shutting something down that's only going to get worse is really bad as well.
Well, and you and I have talked before about, failure in a sense, and people having the fear of failure. And really, I think once you get into this world, you realize that okay, so was it Thomas Edison that said, I found like 10,000 ways?
You're like a cookbook. You're amazing.
That said that I found 10,000 ways it won't work or
Yes,
something.
yeah.
Okay, so that's the same mentality. If you have a goal and you have your dream of what you want to set out and do, there's no magic answer of how you're going to get there. If you believe in the product, then again, it's about being adaptable to change. And I was just going to throw out another one, but I won't.
It's okay. I love your quotes. It's
Well,
awesome.
Anyway. They're just they give you great advice, and anyway, I love the quotes. But it's true. You have to be adaptable to change, and you have to you have to be ready to really adapt. And so let's go back real quick.
Well, I have one quick quote for
Okay,
you.
I love it. Go
which
ahead.
is a Walt Disney quote. It's a very famous quote, and he said, "The best way to start is to stop talking and start doing." And I believe wholeheartedly in that premise, because
Absolutely.
if you never take action and you're just blabbing about something, what can ever come of it?
Nothing. And I think one of my pet peeves is when you see someone and they're talking about this idea that they're going to do, and then Then you never hear anything more about it. And then you'll run into them 4 months later, and then they're talking about another idea, but they never did the first one. And I always want to say, how can I help you?
Right.
You know, how can I help you implement some of these ideas instead of just kind of caving in and playing along with them? You know, I kind of will ask, you know, what can I do?
I have one more quote, and it ties into my passion.
I love it. Go ahead.
My passion for social entrepreneurship. I'm a longtime social entrepreneur, which is basically owning and operating a for-profit business and then taking the profits that are left after you've paid yourself and your employees and then providing some sort of social good to society to address some kind of problem. So the quote is, it's actually a Jesse Jackson quote.
Okay.
And he once said, "Never look down on somebody unless you're extending a hand to lift them up." And I think that if we did more of that, if we did what you were talking about, saying to somebody, how can I help you, instead of saying, what can that person do for me,
right.
Our community would be better, the world would be better, and I think the business climate would be much better as well.
I agree too, and I do feel it in the community. I do see a lot of people coming together. I was in a business a couple days ago, and goodness, I think sometimes we think we have problems, and then you start talking with someone and you realize, and you know, I set everything down and said, how can I help? What can I do?
Yeah.
You know, and really, of course, she was overwhelmed. I mean, very appreciative by that offer, but and just had commented too on how many of others in the community had offered help as well.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's great to hear these stories of just the group and collaborative effort that where we're trying to help each other out. And you see a lot of the like type businesses coming together. I mean, they all have their own specialties and niches, but they're coming together to kind of complement.
Yes.
And so you see a lot more of that, where the people aren't necessarily looking at each other like competition. They're coming together and
absolutely
and asking how can they help.
And I think competition, it's an important factor, not so much early on when you're starting a business. You should kind of know peripherally who your competition is, but when you're first starting, 6 months later, you might have a totally different business with a whole set of different competitors. So I wouldn't recommend spending too much time focusing on competitors early on, but I think what you have to have constantly is an obsession about customers and creating them and listening to them. I think if more businesses did that, we'd have greater success in the field of entrepreneurship.
Right. Well, on that note, and actually we didn't even catch up from what I wanted to say as we started the last one. So anyway, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with Andy Gold and Getting the Edge.
This is the Cannabis Podcast, powered by TruLieve on Radio Influence. It's an inside look and the scientific facts in and around the world of medical cannabis. Now, here is your host, Ian Beckles.
He's a successful entrepreneur, published author, top listing agent, a real estate and finance expert that goes to bat for you every day as a consumer advocate. Your host and the consumer quarterback, Brandon Rhymes.
Welcome back to Getting the Edge. Again, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm your host, Kelly Wilson. Getting the Edge, again, please check out edgebusinessmagazine.com for all of the previous issues of Edge Business Magazine. Getting the Edge is a great product of the Edge Business Magazine community. And I'm sure as we've taken breaks to the show, you've seen some of the commercials that air. We'd love to feature your business in one of those commercials. So to get more information on that, give us an email out, info@edgebusinessmagazine.com. We'll be happy to talk about you. And if you're interested in being a guest, please send us an email, info@edgebusinessmagazine.com. So really excited to have Andy Gold with us today.
Thanks,
you are, again, you wear multiple hats. You're so full of information. and I do want to make sure we take time to talk about some of your past experiences prior to being in higher education. One of the things that we'll be talking, and again, I always say, hit rewind. If you missed any bit of this, make sure you check out from the beginning. We talked a little bit about identifying when it's time to stop a business and let it go and move on. And, you know, I talk to people a lot too, because as you're building a business, we have your business plan and you have your milestones of when you want to hit certain things, right? And a lot of times you have family or your spouses that are on you saying, okay, I'll give you a year. You can go after this venture, and then at that point. So, and that is tough because really you can plan, and I've learned this, you know, the business plan is actually your Bible that you're going to constantly be changing, because it's not that, okay, I have this, now I'm going to go make it happen. There's literally so many obstacles that are going to be thrown at you, but that's okay. You know, you go through them. But how do you know, and when do you determine, okay, let's just say your year is up. You're not hitting the numbers that you wanted to hit. How do you determine whether it's just a little longer until you see the growth, or if indeed this business is not going to work and I need to cut my losses now and put my efforts into something positive and another business potentially?
Sure. So let me just say a couple of things about what you just said. First of all, business planning, as far as I'm concerned and through my experiences, there's a time and a place for business planning, but it's definitely not at the early stages of developing a business idea and bringing it to fruition. So what we focus on instead is business modeling, which is much different than business planning. Business modeling is a rigorous process through which you lay out all of your different hypotheses that you have about your business idea, who your customer is, you know, how you're going to reach customers, generate revenue, those sorts of things. And then you go out and you actually validate all of those different assumptions before you start. Business plans can be very, very useful once you are executing a business model that you know works. But the key early on is not to build a business plan based on a lot of like unknowns,
right,
but rather to build a business model that's based on known, as best as you can tell, facts about your idea. Through that process, what you'll learn is oftentimes this business is a no-go. You know, I cannot validate that that's a problem that exists in the world.
Because really, that information, your business modeling, is what you need for the information to put into the plan, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so you that is crucial that you have that initially.
Yeah, and then I would say, to answer your question, we use a model about what's called the entrepreneurial method, and it's called effectuation.
I like that, effectuation.
Effectuation. A woman by the name of Saras Sarasvathy. I know that's a mouthful, but Dr. Saras Sarasvathy, she's a friend of mine, and she teaches at the University of Virginia at the Darden School of Business. She's the one who developed this model, and it's a fascinating model for your listeners and viewers to really investigate a bit further. What it does is it gives us a framework for 5 pillars of how expert entrepreneurs think and operate. She was not concerned when she did this research about novice entrepreneurs. Those are the people that jump out of an airplane and try to build a parachute as they're cascading down to the ground, and they never do, and they crash into the ground, or their business goes out of business, and they learn the hard way.
Right.
Experienced entrepreneurs don't do this. So the 5 things she uncovered was, number 1, start with what you have. When you have a business idea, spend little to no time searching for things that you think you need, but rather start with what you have.
Right.
People you know, things you have, and so forth. Number 2, calculate your affordable loss, something we were talking about before to answer your question. How much are you prepared to lose by starting this business? By asking yourself that question, it makes it a lot easier to define a time period at which you end that business enterprise. Because if you're only willing to lose 6 months of your time and $10,000 and you reach that threshold,
right,
and the business isn't happening, well, do you really want to go past that if you've previously determined that that was your threshold? It helps immensely to do that.
That
the
makes
third pillar of effectuation, which is equally important, is that you need a community of people to build this business with, people to lean on,
right,
people to share the risk with. So it's sort of like a co-creation element of starting a business. The fourth element is to embrace and recognize that serendipity is such an important part of starting a business. So these unforeseen things that happen that we don't expect, and boom, all of a sudden we're taking in a different direction.
I love that you love that word. I mean, that is so special to me. And then we've talked a lot about just the way things happen and how the universe works. But I do not want to interrupt your flow
That's
of pillars.
Okay. No, you're doing a good job. So that's four.
Okay.
Is recognize that unforeseen things are going to happen, but when they happen, even if they don't seem good, embrace them as opportunities to lift off, to get to someplace else. View them as something that can really cascade you in a whole new direction. We all encounter these serendipitous moments, but unfortunately we miss them because we're like in our phones, walking on the street, and we're not seeing things. And
so
that's
look
a major
up
barrier.
and pay attention.
And
right.
pay attention.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is recognize that the future is not predictable, that you can't realistically predict, 3, 4, 5 years out. You can try, but it's so unknown. So what you can do is you can take control of your time right now and say, you know what I can do based on what I have, and be able to move a business forward based on that, and learn as you go.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so...
Well, it's not my advice, it's Sarah Sarasvathi's advice. I just love it so much, it resonates with me, so we teach it.
And I see why it would, and that is a great evaluator in a sense, or
great.
Monitor as far as when you're setting milestones and guidelines, and how important it is to have the business modeling done ahead of the time and the plan, and that makes perfect sense. Okay, so you just answered it.
The best analogy that Saras gives to explain how expert entrepreneurs operate is that, like I like to cook, as you can see. I got my belly going here. But I'm a novice chef, so I just kind of cobble together dishes and so forth. Some people who aren't as risk-oriented as me, let's say, will take a recipe and they'll go to Publix, they'll get their ingredients, they'll follow the step-by-step, put the dish in, cross their finger, hope the dish looks... And that's how novice entrepreneurs operate as well. They have an idea of where they want to go. They think about what resources they need. They go try to get the resources, so on. But she said what expert entrepreneurs do in this metaphor that we're talking about is they go to their refrigerator in their dwelling, wherever they live. They open the doors. They see what kind of ingredients they have already, and they simply start cooking with what they have. They don't spend time going to Publix or searching for resources that they don't have. They start with what they do have. And the reason that that's powerful is it allows you to take action much faster. And the sooner you take action, the sooner you're learning, and the sooner you're learning, the better off you are, and especially as it relates to small business enterprising and entrepreneurship.
Absolutely, and you're never going to have all the answers. I mean, it's with everything. Whether you're planning to have a child, whether you're planning to do anything, and you look back on life, and nothing really is, the timing's never great with anything.
Oh my God, when we, talking about children, when we had our first son, Matthew, my wife Ann and I brought him home from the hospital in New Rochelle. Everything was cool at the hospital. They were taking care of him and everything in the nursery. We bring him home and we put him into his crib. We had this nice red crib, and I remember my wife and I staring at him. He was sleeping, and we were like, well, are we supposed to do something? So I remember reaching in and kind of like nudging him, like to get him to do something. We didn't know. We were like novice parents. We had no idea. But you learn as you go through that process, and Parenting, of course, is very, very hard, but there's a lot of things you learn through parenting that can help a lot in business.
Looking back on my career, it's everything that I've learned from the different, phases of my career, with real estate kind of being early on, and then kind of everything leads you to ultimately where you're going. And it's those serendipitous moments that I think occur throughout our lives, if we're aware of them, that will then mold us and shift us onto the paths we're ultimately supposed to be on. And I think that's if you let it and you're open to that. And it's just amazing how the universe works. And it's great talking to other people that agree or that see that and have had those same effects and things happen in their own lives that make it so. I mean, it's a real real thing.
The high school I went to is a high school called Brooklyn Tech High School. Do you want to guess where that is?
Maybe Brooklyn?
You got it.
Okay.
But the only reason I went to Brooklyn Tech High School was because of a serendipitous moment in my life. A movie came out called Saturday Night Fever. You probably have heard of it. And my friends went to see it, and we were like, oh my gosh, there's all this cool stuff happening in Brooklyn. I was from Manhattan. I had spent like no time in Brooklyn. So we decided to go there because of that movie, which for the children listening to this, that's a really bad reason to pick a high school, okay? Don't do that. So I go there, and why is that important? It's important because my English teacher I met my first year at that school taught me so much about finance and accounting and the world of investing. I didn't learn anything about English from him, but I learned everything about investing, and that led to my first career on Wall Street. So had I not gone to that movie, or that movie had not come out that year, I wouldn't have ended up at Brooklyn Tech High School. I wouldn't have met Mr. Edwards, and probably wouldn't have had my first career working on Wall Street. So it's just a weird thing that happened, but it kind of led me down this crazy path.
Well, and just a quick, it's amazing how that happens. And I always say, even with my daughter, who's 18 now, my youngest, I say just take the first step, because you never know what that will lead to. And quick story, when I was, actually I just moved here from college, wasn't sure what I wanted to do at that point, and I was waitressing and bartending. I met someone that then said, hey, I love your personality, you should come work for a title company. I didn't even know what a title company was, but that led to me investigating that and seeing that, and then ultimately led me then to having this career in real estate. Had I not started a job at that restaurant, I would have never met that woman, and who knows what path. It's just, again, how
embrace serendipity.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. A lot more for you. We'll be back with Getting the Edge.
This is the Cannabis Podcast, powered by TrueLeaf on Radio Influence. It's an inside look and the scientific facts in and around the world of medical cannabis. Now, here is your host, Ian Beckles.
He's a successful entrepreneur, published author, top listing agent, a real estate and finance expert that goes to bat for you every day as a consumer advocate. Your host and the consumer quarterback, Brandon Rhymes.
Welcome back to Getting the Edge. I'm your host, Kelly Wilson. So excited to be here with you today. I'm always excited to be here on Thursdays, but especially excited today because Andy Gold is in our studio with us today. Actually, we're at the Great Genghis Khan restaurant.
Great food. I love it here. I eat here at least once a week.
That's so funny.
Awesome food.
Yeah, you feel right at home.
Yes.
But great opportunity to, I love it. And Ergen Tech, who is the owner of Genghis Khan, is an amazing individual in our community. Just does a lot for the community, and his foundation, Feed the Need. So thank you to Ergen. I want to thank WeBeam TV, who is we're produced by Tampa Bay Multimedia. If you're looking for your own podcast or visual podcast, as this might be, definitely check them out because they're awesome. So WeBeamTV.com, you can find out more information, or just email us, info@edgebusinessmagazine.com, and we'll give you all the answers and information you need. And before we get started, make sure you register and subscribe to Edge Business Magazine, our latest issue. Actually, you can stop by Genghis Khan here in South Tampa. You can pick up a copy, and there's some other destinations or places on our website for copies as well. So anyway, we're wrapping up the show.
Okay.
So you mentioned Wall Street briefly, and so let's talk a little bit about where are you from.
Okay.
You mentioned Brooklyn and attending Brooklyn High School.
Yep.
So where were you from originally?
Okay, I was born and raised in Manhattan, in New York City.
That's kind of cool, right?
I guess, you know, when you grow up in New York City, you think like everybody's from New York City when you're a child, you know, so you don't know any different. It's just the way it was. So I'm a product of public education my whole academic career. I went to high school in Brooklyn, as I mentioned earlier, as a result of Saturday Night Fever.
So my goodness, how long does it take you to get to school from Manhattan if you go to school in Brooklyn?
Well, the reason I went there, you had to take, I wasn't very good at taking tests, nor was I all that intelligent when I was in middle school, let alone today. But back then, I definitely was a bad test taker. But the high school I was zoned for was called Brandeis High School in Manhattan. It really wasn't a very good high school at that time. So my parents were kind of nervous about that. They said, you got to take a test to get into one of these better public high schools. So I did, and fortunately scored high enough to be able to go. So that's kind of how I ended up there. It took about like 35 to 40 minutes on the subway to get there.
It's not too bad.
D train down to DeKalb Avenue in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, just, you know, it's great when you spend time in the city. It's always great to come back to Tampa.
Yep.
But I can only imagine growing up there. Okay.
Yeah.
So then what kind of family then were you from? What did your parents do? Or
sure. My mom, Mona, was a social worker. So she worked with people that had parents that were getting on in age and would help to coach and advise them in how to get them into assisted living facilities and things like that. So she was for sure, social do-gooder and a really prominent person in my life today. You know, really impacted me greatly. My dad, Bert, he was a stockbroker on Wall Street. Bert and Mona. And
love it.
He was awesome also. Both of them are no longer alive, unfortunately, but they were really great working class parents and instilled very, very important values in my two older sisters, Abby and Steffi, and myself.
Now, are your sisters still up north?
Yeah, well, my sister Abby lives in Manhattan, and she works for a company called Weber Shandwick. She's got a very big job there in their human resources department. And then my sister Stephanie lives in New Rochelle, which is a suburb of New York City, and she's been a public school teacher in the Bronx for the past 30 years.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So that's great kind of family upbringing. Yeah. Now, were you encouraged to dream as a child? I mean, was that instilled?
I mean, my dad, I think, always aspired to own his own business. My grandfather owned a chain of dry cleaning operations, so I spent time as a child going to the stores with my sisters, and we would help customers and, you know, pack things up. So I was around small business enterprising from a very young age. But my parents were always extraordinarily supportive of my sisters and I in whatever endeavors we wanted. Like, for example, I played the drums. I wanted to learn how to play the drums. Did they like it, me making all this racket in an apartment building in New York City and annoying neighbors?
The neighbors,
no,
right.
But they let me do it, and they thought, you know, gosh, he's really passionate about that. So thankfully, they did that because I really enjoyed that a lot and instilled that interest and passion in my younger son, Greg.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
What was your first business venture?
The first business venture I had was at the end of my Wall Street career. I raised capital with a business partner of mine, and we had a hedge fund, which is like an aggressive money management business. Right. So we ended up selling that business several years later, thankfully, because I don't think I was long for that type of industry. I mean, I worked on Wall Street for a while, but when you're immersed in managing other people's money and the things associated with it, it can really be soul draining. So I was happy we were able to sell that and get
But again, great experience, I'm sure, and it helped kind of...
I mean, we raised $56 million in capital, and I learned a lot about how hard it is to raise money and how many people you can get down to the 1 yard line but not across the goal line. And it's a numbers game, capital raising.
And then the obligations, or just the responsibility then from raising that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then the expectations and the deliverance, like from that point. Yeah. What, if you could go back in, so let's say 25, 30 years to younger, what advice would you give your younger self?
I would tell my younger self to be more mindful about the pitfalls and risks in business than I was aware of at the time. I think I learned by doing the hard way, because I didn't have access to any of these resources of people telling me to test my idea, and you probably experienced similar things.
Absolutely.
I think I'm better off for that, but I think if I were to go back in time, I would have put myself through a more rigorous process of validating different ideas and projects I wanted to work on.
Sometimes being naive it can be a good thing. Sometimes it has its benefits, but ultimately you need to be informed.
I just want to say one other thing that I would tell myself earlier on, especially when I was working in the investment banking industry, is the really significant importance of serving other people and not getting so caught up in what it is you're doing and ignoring that you also have an obligation to do things for other people.
Right.
And I didn't really realize that till the end of that career, that first phase I had professionally on Wall Street. But ever since then, that's been what I've been all about.
Right. I think it's great to, I think, early on, even with Edge, I was so focused on helping and being a part and providing what I didn't have necessarily, that on the monetization part of it came secondary. Yeah. And that can almost hurt you later. It's great to have the balance in the middle of it all as you're growing things. Yeah. So if you looked at, okay, so actually I'm trying to think what best I want to ask. What has been the toughest lesson that you've learned? It's taking you the hardest
to learn.
In business
or just in life in general?
Overall, either or has been most impactful.
I would say the toughest lesson I've learned is having, at least professionally, having the wherewithal to end something that you really have a personal attachment to.
Right.
It's been really hard for me, still is to this day. I work on different projects and I'm just so passionate about it. But it's not really a good use of my time sometimes, but yet I keep working on it, and it's not, I think it's a lesson I'm still learning, so I think that's probably something that I need to continue to advance.
Right, that's great. Yeah. Did somebody give you advice once that just really
Well, I can tell you a story. My mom, Mona, she was from Poland, and she moved here very early on in life. So as I was growing up as a child, we would always host Thanksgiving at my apartment. And as I got older, I realized that none of my relatives on my mom's side were ever there. It was just all my dad's relatives, so I didn't know what was up with that. So my sisters and I eventually got up the guts to go talk to my parents about, why, is there a problem there?
Right.
So my mom explained to us, it was very hard for her to do it, that my entire family on my mom's side of the family had perished in the Holocaust.
Oh my goodness.
My sisters and I, who are young, are listening to this story, and we're feeling the emotions of anger and feeling really sad and sorry for everything that's happened to our family. And my mom, she could have instilled into us, a sense of hatred for others, based on that experience. But she didn't. She captured that moment, and she said, look, that was just an isolated time in history. Some very few people doing some really bad things. I don't want you and your sisters to do that. So you'll have opportunities as you grow up to do business with people from all over the world, whether they be from Germany or elsewhere. And it would make me sad, Mona, sad, to hear that you're not doing those things.
Oh, wow.
So as I grew up, I always have reflected on that moment in my life as a moment to keep me on an ethical path and a moral path. Because, you know, when you work in business in general and Wall Street specifically, you're provided with ample opportunities to sway from that. And I always thought to myself when I was tempted to do something that I shouldn't be doing, you know, what would Mona think?
Right.
You know, like if she saw her son in handcuffs and being dragged away, and it always nudged me back, you know, on course.
Wow.
So I think that's probably the most formidable and remembering life lesson that was imparted on me.
That's a great example. I think we can all kind of take something from that.
I always say, what would Mona think?
Right?
You know,
What would Mona think?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we all have a Mona too
exactly.
that we can personalize
find your
that
Mona.
with.
Yeah.
Wow.
Find your Mona.
What might be, we've learned a lot about Andy Gold, PhD today, but what might people be surprised to know about you?
People would be very surprised to know that when I was in middle school and high school, I had long hair down to here and had aspirations of pursuing a career as a rock and roll drummer.
Wow.
Would you have guessed that?
No, not at all.
I know. And they probably wouldn't have.
No,
either.
I love learning all of this.
Yes,
It's amazing.
That's one thing. Another thing you might be really surprised to know is that I'm a huge fan of hip hop music. I love hip hop music, okay, especially old school hip hop. So, you know, I'm all about, you know, Tupac and that whole generation of artists. But I only got exposure to those folks through my younger son, Greg.
Right.
He works, I didn't talk about my kids or my wife. I mean, I could talk about so much. My wife, Ann, is an amazing wife. She's put up with my nonsense for years. But she's a school teacher as well. And I just feel really lucky to have been surrounded by all those folks.
Well, like I said, we could talk forever.
You sure could.
And we'll bring you back on, and we'll have you talk. We'll come up with a segment that we can do together.
All right.
Andy, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure being here.
Information, I know we have some provided on the screen, but startup.com, what is it?
You're
Operation
close.
Startup.
So you could find us at operationstartup.com. You could also track me down at Hillsborough Community College. If you just go to hccfl.edu, you can find me there. Also, my Twitter handle is @ProfAndyGold. I tweet articles mostly about leadership, entrepreneurship, serendipity, and things of that sort. So you can catch up with me there as well.
Absolutely. Well, it's been great. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today for Getting the Edge. Make sure you check back next week. We'll have a new show for you and full of information and great people and great learning experiences. So edgebusinessmagazine.com. In the meantime, have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.